This is the Amp Hour Podcast, recorded December 9th, 2013. Episode 175, with guest Andrew Whitty, Telistic, Timepiece, Technomania.
Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Dave Jones from the EEV blog.
And I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
And I'm Andrew Whitty from Pebble Technology.
Hey, Andrew. I'm being ganged up on again. You're from Case Western, same as Chris.
I am indeed. I don't know if I ever met Chris there, or...
No, I was hiding in the shadows.
Okay.
So
Weren't we all?
Yeah, yes,
so
exactly.
Yeah, we're nerds, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how it really goes.
You are, tell us all about where you're from and who you work for, which is the most important thing, which everyone wants to know.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest and all that. I've worked for the past 2.5 years at Pebble. It was Impulse before that, and we make smartwatches. You may have heard of us from our Kickstarter project, which was...
Tiny little
was
project.
That, a year and a half ago? Yeah, well, a little Kickstarter project.
Yeah, a little tiny one. If people don't know that, that's a reference to it being the biggest Kickstarter ever, the $10 million Kickstarter project.
Is it still the biggest Kickstarter? Or...
As of the last time I checked. I know there have been some big ones. It might not be anymore, but I believe it is.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the case? Is it because this was sort of like one of the first sort of consumer gadgety gear freak kind of projects on there, or
I don't know. It wasn't the first, and we actually reached out to a few that had been on there that were consumer projects, like the Lunatic watch and the Elevation Dock, which had been a record before us. I think
but
actually
the Lunatic
they both had...
was just a band, wasn't it? It was just a watch band, so it wasn't actually a watch.
Correct.
Yep.
We definitely were able to help build up some hype around sort of Kickstarter becoming more mainstream, and that, I mean, there was only one chance to do that, and we took it, and that certainly helped.
Yeah. And what did that involve? What did that hype involve?
We talked to the press a lot. And even starting out, we arranged an exclusive with Engadget to start the project off, and then I mean, fortunately, we didn't have to do any really crazy PR management stuff because it was a hot enough story that people were interested. But
they helped. Came to you,
yeah.
Right. So did you join Pebble before the Kickstarter campaign?
About a year before the Kickstarter, actually.
Oh, a year before, right. So tell us, who are the founders of the Pebble, and why they brought you on board, and what was the size of the team and stuff like that before?
Sure. So Eric Mijakovsky is the founder of Pebble. He actually founded the company right out of school. At the time I joined, it was Eric and a part-time industrial designer, mechanical guy, and some interns on the software side. And that was basically it. And so Well,
that's still quite reasonable in terms of, a guy straight out of school forming a company.
Yeah.
Where did the money come from? Venture?
Well, at the time I joined, yes, because he'd gone through Y Combinator. Which is a startup accelerator. You've heard of them. Most in the Silicon Valley area, mostly targeted around software startups. But it's been increasing lately. But they had been maybe once every 6 months or a year accepted a hardware startup, and Pebble was one.
Right. So you joined about a year before. At what state was the project in at that time?
Well, Eric had shipped a watch called the Impulse that worked with Blackberries, which was a reasonable decision to make back in 2007 or so. The iPhone had just come on the scene, but
right. And he did all that himself, did he? Or that was a personal project of his?
He'd started it, I think, as a senior design project and then turned it into a company, and I had some help.
Right.
But it wasn't just Eric solo.
Got it. So was that a popular watch?
It was not all that popular, and the manufacturing runs weren't that big, but even then we didn't sell out, and that was partly because, I mean, the number one question we got about it was, does it support the iPhone?
Right.
And if the answer was no, and it didn't even really... one of the reasons I came on board was to make it support Android, which we were barely able to do.
Huh. What about... so you said it was a BlackBerry watch to
BlackBerry
start with?
compatible, yeah.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even know... So BlackBerry... was that still Bluetooth back then as well?
It was Bluetooth. We used open source Bluetooth stack. I forget the name of it. That was originally written as a user mode stack for jailbroken iPhones or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And it was running on this really tiny microcontroller, a NXP ARM7 with like 32K of flash and 8K of RAM or 4K of RAM.
What are you talking about? Ridiculous. That's huge. Come on.
Well, for a Bluetooth stack?
Right.
Okay. Well, you know.
Bluetooth is really a messy protocol.
Yeah.
With way too much software involved. And so we were able to, using a very low level portion of the Bluetooth protocol called L2CAP, we were able to communicate with Blackberries and Blackberry apps. But support on Android was limited and iOS non-existent. And
well, I bet you guys are kicking yourselves for not sticking with BlackBerry these days, right?
We still get asked when
really?
we'll work with BlackBerry or Windows Phone.
Really? Oh, interesting. Yeah. See, this is an interesting intersection because, I mean, like, the Pebble is such a cool, it's such a, like, it's a great piece of consumer hardware, right? You guys are a hardware startup. It's a piece of consumer hardware. It's interesting from the embedded perspective, and yet it's such a, it crosses over into that consumer space where it starts to get insane with, people caring about, oh, what's your phone specs? What are like specs and all that? All the one-upetry that the big players like Samsung and all the
stuff that people talk about over on XDA developers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So how's that experience been? Yeah. I mean, what is that like to have to kind of jump into that world?
Well, it's been interesting for sure, but I mean, we've tried to keep out of the specs race. Right? Like, we don't have a color screen. We don't have a camera. There's no bickering over how many megapixels the camera has because there is no camera.
Right.
Yet.
Oh, goodness. Let's not go there.
Yeah. I don't know. One of my colleagues brought in this like Casio camera watch from 1997. So, I mean, the idea's been around for a while.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's catching on.
Just waiting for that killer app right after Google Glass. That's the next one.
See, I'm not sure, Andrew, if you've seen my do-it-yourself scientific calculator watch. It was the world's first do-it-yourself.
It's hideous.
Well, as it says.
It's hideous.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It uses all off-the-shelf parts. And anyway, at around about the same time, all this sort of smartwatch, well, actually just before the smartwatch revolution, I thought, I'd bang in all these features.
The Spot Watch or the...
I don't know the exact timeline, but it was sort of, it was before all of, I think it was before, when was it? I don't know, it was 5 years ago.
Like the...
What timeline would have that been in? So 4 or 5 years ago, so like 2009 or something.
Yeah, that might have been the tail end of Microsoft's Spot Watch stuff. And then there was the Meta Watch that spun out of Fossil.
Okay. Anyway, it was around about that time, I thought, I'll feature, I was working on my next version. I'll bang all these features in there. It'd have everything, including the kitchen sink, And then, all this smartwatch revolution has now happened. And now I'm going, well, geez, there's so many out there. They're a dime a dozen. No, my next version is going to be just a scientific calculator watch. It's not going to do anything else, damn it. It's not going to have anything else in it. It's just
do one thing and do it right. Well,
that's right.
Yeah, like the Pebble does. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
like I said, Bluetooth is really a mess. So if being a scientific calculator watch means you don't have to deal with Bluetooth, then
yeah, exactly. I don't know, and I'll get like 2 years battery life out of it.
Sure,
you know,
I don't see
none
why
of this
not.
fast processor. The processor will be running at 32 kilohertz, you know, because it doesn't need to go any quicker. And screw everything else. And yeah, it's like a real watch, you know. Well, I'm old school, you know. I want my watch to have, you know, at least a couple of years battery life. Thank you very much. I don't want to have to charge my watch. Goodness. Having a hard enough time remembering to charge my mobile.
Yeah, that's the dream.
So what's the battery? Right.
We try to at least do a little better than a phone. So you can get a week out of a Pebble, but it's not the same as a analog watch where you can go 3 years or more.
Yeah. Right. How much effort went into power consumption of this thing from the get-go?
It's one of our biggest concerns, definitely, when I'm speccing parts, when we're doing software design.
Was there any feature trade-off, like going, no, battery life is more important, we're not putting that feature in because that's going to kill the battery life?
Well, the Impulse, our first product, was actually a color OLED display.
Right. How many hours did you get? Like hours, not days.
I mean, even with the display off, there was some other stuff in there that was burning power, and so you only got maybe 2 days. But definitely, if you wanted the OLED to be on, you're talking hours.
Right. And the Pebble gets, what, a week?
Yeah, a week, 5 to 7 days.
Is that with the screen permanently on?
With the screen on all the time and updating even once per second.
Because it's an e-ink display, isn't it?
No, it's not an e-ink display, and there's a lot of confusion there.
Let's talk about the screen technology.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So the screen we're using we call it an e-paper screen, and we think that's a pretty good way to sort of describe the characteristics. It's on all the time. It's black and white.
Oh, it's this sharp memory?
But it's the LCD? Sharp memory LCD, and I don't know if you've experimented with those.
Yes, I'm going to use that. Yeah, I've got some. I've done a video on it. I'm going to use it in my next watch as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. And one of the things that's cool about that display is for a small volume electronics designer, displays seem to be one of the most difficult types of components to source and work with.
Oh, yeah.
But the Sharp display, like, you don't need an NDA to get the data sheet. You can buy them off Mauser, and at least when they're in stock. At least in terms of displays, for a fairly advanced and unique display, it's pretty easy to work with in small volume.
Yep. And what frequency are you actually running it at?
So the display is pretty unique in that because it's memory in pixel, there's no controller. You talk SPI directly to the glass. And everyone who I talked to...
you said you're updating once per second.
We can update once per second. We can update at, I think, 25 or 30 frames per second. And we do during animations.
Right.
But there's no fixed frame rate. It's dynamic because of the fact that it's got this memory. And you can even do partial refreshes and so forth.
So you said it's called pixel... memory in pixel? What does that
memory in pixel
mean?
So they fabricate it using a TFT process, but your standard TFT array just has one transistor per pixel, and so you've got to constantly refresh it because the pixel is a capacitor and there's leakage, and so you need to refresh it.
Like DRAM.
Yeah, kind of like DRAM.
Yeah.
A really crappy DRAM, but one you can see.
Right.
But the Sharp memory LCD actually has an SRAM cell in each pixel.
So once you set the data to it, it just stays there.
Once you set the pixel, it stays there.
Interesting.
So you don't have to update it. You can put an image on there, and then it just requires static current to keep the keep the information there.
Right. So it needs a 1 hertz clock because you have to invert the polarity of the voltage on the liquid crystals because liquid crystals don't like a DC bias, but that's a pretty easy requirement to satisfy.
And it's pretty low power too at 1 hertz.
Yeah.
Did you guys see that video that Ben Krasno made about LCDs?
Making your own LCD. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
that was brilliant.
No, I don't think I saw that one. That sounds good.
I really had never seen how. I guess I never understood how they work before. Just like the etching process and everything like that. I mean, I'm guessing with this Sharp thing, it's an actual a static. There's like a square pixel or something, right? I mean, it's not like a defined element like old 7-segment type LCDs were like, right?
Right. Well, that's the distinguishing factor of a TFT array LCD where you've just got an array of pixels that are square versus like the 7-segment LCDs. It's sort of like each segment is a pixel and they have the shape.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're not square.
Right.
Do you know like the current? I'm guessing you probably live and breathe this stuff, and sounds like Dave's dealt with it as well. So I'm kind of on the outside here, but what kind of like current is it just to hold it on with that 1 hertz inverting?
It's like 10 microamps or something.
Yeah, I thought it was around about 5. There's a couple of modes. There's a couple of, I think it can be as much as 15
modes.
or
But annoyingly, it's a 5-volt part, and so we actually we burn more current in the inefficiency of the boost converter than the display actually consumes when it's static.
I know. I've had the same issue. I wanted designed in. Of course, you want to run it off a single coin cell, with 3 volts down to 2.7 minimum.
Yep.
And well, you can't. You've got to have that bloody blasted
You got to double
converter.
stack them now, right? Oh man, that's
I know. Yeah, you got to double stack your battery.
Right.
So was that what design? How did you decide whether or not you went for I presume it's a single coin cell to power it?
No, it's a lithium-ion polymers pouch cell. So the kind that's like 4.2 volt cutoff and then 3.7 roughly in the flat region.
But how much angst went into the design decision to go for a single cell or a dual cell battery? Because if you went for the dual cell, then you wouldn't be you could power it without the boost converter.
We could, but there was really no question in terms of the overall like cost and complexity of the battery system, and the fact that
then you got the charging in the management.
You got charging,
and
charging is a lot harder because you can use a linear charger to charge a 1-cell battery from USB, and you need a step-up charger to charge dual-cell battery. And the extra mechanical complexity of having 2 cells means you're wasting more internal volume.
Yes. It's all a big trade-off.
Weight, right, as well.
Yeah. So from the get-go, you pretty much just went, we've got to have a boost converter, and there's more benefits to using a single cell lithium battery.
So we put in the boost converter. We put in a level translator to be able to talk to the display from our MCU, which is down at 1.8 volts.
Right.
There's not
it's a bastard, isn't it?
Yeah. Finding a boost converter that is not designed for like double A's and therefore has the input voltage range we need, and that is efficient at incredibly low loads of 5 or 10 microamps or whatever the display is. There aren't too many out there, so that was a lot of designing something like this comes down to shopping for components, and that was one of the trickier. That was one of the trickier shopping exercises. It turned out we have excess output current capacity on that boost, as I suppose you might expect, given the low demand of the display.
Exactly.
And so one of the happier things that happened in the design was that we were able to also use that 5-volt rail for the white LEDs.
Oh, nice.
For the backlight.
For the backlight.
Right,
yeah.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep.
You should have put in like an optional taser or something as well,
Optional taser. We actually had that request on the forum. A user was concerned that the vibration of the vibrating motor would not be strong enough to get his attention, so he wanted a built-in taser.
Oh my god! You never know; those kind of things they can turn it into an even more breakout product. The watch that zaps you awake. That would be terrible.
In my scientific calculator watch, I just I needed 5 volts for the LCD as well, and 5 volts for the backlight LED as well, same as this. And I just I went, bugger it, I'll just generate a PWM signal on one of the micro pins and just use that as a doubler. And well, it worked, but efficiency,
right. Now you can't
put
your micro into the low power modes, and
yeah, exactly. But it didn't matter because my LCD was, reasonably high power that I had to switch it off anyway. So I'd stay on for 5 minutes and then switch it off. So it was a different ball game.
Got it.
Did that end up affecting you at all? Because it's got a boost converter on there, and those. Not saying it would be, but it could be a little noisier because you're slamming current around. Did you have any, EMI testing problems at all, or what happened when you got to that point?
No, I mean EMC is. We're dealing with, in the grand scheme of things, such small currents, and the board is so tiny. It's like 2 by 1 centimeters or something. So inherently, any loop on there is going to be tiny. Of course, with reasonable layout, it's really, really tiny. And so EMC has not really been a challenge for it. Now, antenna performance has been a challenge, which is a whole other story, but EMC hasn't been too much of an issue for us.
Right.
And how much grief did you go through to pass FCC compliance? What sort of compliances did you have to pass to sell this worldwide?
FCC and CE are the big ones.
Yep.
And obviously the requirements are a little bit different. For us, that all sort of gets abstracted away. We have our manufacturing partner kind of run the show there, and obviously we tell them what certifications we need to get, but they just engage a testing lab. We send it off. We talk to the testing lab and give them whatever software they need for getting it in the special modes where the radio is off or transmitting a carrier wave on such and such channel or whatever, and then they do the testing and get a binder, and it's all pretty.
That's awesome.
And it passed, and you didn't have to respin anything?
Not for compliance. No, we didn't. So we lucked out there.
Awesome. That's great. First shot and done. That's the dream, right? I mean,
yeah. No, I wish I could say that about the antenna performance.
Yeah. So what
compliance we did okay.
What's up with the antenna? Because if people don't know, it does have Bluetooth on there. Are there any other RF modes? I didn't think there was anything else.
No,
there.
It's just Bluetooth, and okay. I mean, a simple RF is definitely good in terms of size and battery life.
Oh yeah, right.
But we started. We used a pre-certified Bluetooth module that already had an FCC cert, so that we would just need to get the part B, which is the thing that any device has to have, and then the part C, I believe, which is if you're an intentional emitter,
which you are,
which we are, then we were able to. So the theory went, we'd be able to use the modular certification of this module that we were using. But to use the modular certification, you need to use one of the pre-approved antennas, and the manufacturer of our module had approved a couple different ceramic chip antennas.
Did you have any issue with, absorption by the person's wrist and things like that, and the orientation?
So we've got this little ceramic antenna. It's designed to perform on such a size of board because it needs a ground plane.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that. And we've got
right?
wrapped around the outside of the watch, there's this flexible circuit which has basically connection for all the buttons. You've got the display on the front, which there's a bunch of layers in the display, but for 2.4 gigahertz, it's basically a sheet of metal.
Yeah.
And then you've got the person's arm, which is like a bucket of water. It's hugely absorptive at 2.4 gigahertz. Like that's the reason they use 2.4 gigahertz for microwave ovens, right? Is that water is hugely absorptive at that frequency. So you're basically in this cage, and the ceramic antenna performance was really poor. And we went through a few iterations of that and worked with the antenna manufacturer. And then we said, you know what? We need to just do our own antenna design. And we didn't do it ourselves. We had an outside office actually do the design.
That's business, cool. Man. That's
business. That's how it works.
Yeah.
But we ended up doing a printed antenna. It's actually on that flexible circuit board, and then there's like a little pogo pin or something that makes contact from the main board to the where the antenna is on the flex board.
Wow,
sweet.
And it works decently well. It's still in terms of there's like a 10 dB loss or something on the antenna, which is really it's it's not great, but it works pretty well, and people are reporting 30 meters of Bluetooth range, which is pretty good
because
for a Bluetooth device.
It's really just designed to couple to your phone, right?
Right, and so if you're wearing the watch and you're carrying your phone in your pocket, it's fine, and we can even back down the transmit power a little bit.
Even if your phone's in your back pocket and your watch is
swinging your arm, you're doing a pull-up.
So when we're testing the performance, like you do all the lab testing and you get the antenna characterization and you make sure your radiation patterns look good and so forth. But then you do real-world testing, too, and you do range. But one of the important ones is cross-body, so you've got the phone in the back pocket and the watch out in front of you, and making sure that the performance is still good.
With the meat shield in between and everything.
Exactly.
Now, does the watch periodically ping the phone or the app or vice versa so it can tell you it's out of range?
Yes, so at the application layer, that's a fairly slow period. Right. But at the lower layers of Bluetooth, there's some more frequent exchange going on.
Right. So the watch knows it's out of range. Does it tell it and show you on the screen going, "Oh, I'm out of range"?
On the phone screen, yes. On the Pebble screen, no. But in the latest version of the SDK, we've made that available as an API to some app developers, so they can make an app that tells you whether you're connected to your
Well, that's an interesting route as well. I'd like to talk about is the SDK, because you mentioned for the show that you guys are getting ready to launch the next version of it, but even just having one out there already. I'm interested in kind of that dynamic between, you're the hardware maker, you've got this product with like firmware ready to go, and then you got people screaming at you to upgrade it, and they want to develop apps, and you're building a platform at this point. What is that experience like as a hardware designer?
Well, I mean, at the level of choosing hardware, it's mostly about, okay, how much memory, how much CPU performance do we need? What else do we need in order to, enable it to be a platform? And one of the decisions we made that you might think is a little bit contrary to being a platform for third-party software is choosing a microcontroller as opposed to like an ARM Cortex-A microprocessor as the platform.
That's a power thing, man.
It's a power thing.
Yeah.
Fortunately, those all have memory protection units, so we can use that. I mean, it's not the same as virtual memory, but we can use that to sort of sandbox the third-party apps.
So, can you explain that to dumb analog guy here? And of course, any of our dumb analog listeners as well. We don't want to forget them.
Okay. So there is a peripheral device in the microcontroller that we can turn on. It's called the memory protection unit, and basically it sits on the memory bus, and it throws an interrupt whenever you access an address outside of a certain range or group of ranges. And then the interrupt handler, which is kernel code, can deal with that basically by killing the offending app, which we're using FreeRTOS, so apps run in a FreeRTOS task that's configured to have sort of low privilege and the memory protection unit turned on, and we can kill that task if things go haywire.
Huh. So does that mean that your developers, do you have two different levels of developers, some writing apps directly for the Pebble and then some writing like phone side applications?
Yeah, so
as
that's
well?
Another thing we offer is just the ability to, especially on Android where you have the intent system on Android, but also with iOS, the ability to just make a phone app that interacts with the Pebble.
Yeah.
So some people do that, but obviously the big, really compelling thing is to write native apps for the Pebble.
Yeah. That sounds really different, though, too, because, I mean, like you said, it's not quite an app market, or at least it's different than how I think of app stuff, because I think of, large marketplaces where people are writing high-level programs and stuff like that, but, you guys have, like, a firmware market. That's actually really different than anything I've ever heard of before. That's
right.
Kind of...
Well, we like to compare the device in terms of the horsepower and graphics and so forth to, like, the original Macintosh. I mean, even down to them both having 128K of RAM. It's a nice, neat comparison. Or the early PDAs, Palm and Newton and that stuff.
Well, it would just be great if I could get like someone in the actual Android app development market not to be like, yeah, I'm going to use all your phone's memory, so it'll come back in a couple minutes. Don't worry about it. If you get like 3 or 4 developers like thinking about memory management and stuff, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Now with the campaign, you originally asked for 100,000 goal, and that was, I don't know what, a couple of thousand watches maybe, something like that. But you ended up getting 1,000, right? Yeah, nice round number. You ended up getting $10 million and selling having 60,000 or so backers wanting watches or more, I think. How did that change your game plan? From because there's a whole different game plan from going from manufacturing 1,000 watches, which you can almost do almost by hand, to doing 60-odd thousand.
Right. So we had actually originally the game plan to sort of go into full mass production and go overseas and so forth. Okay. Back when we were trying to raise venture capital. And when that fell through and we went on Kickstarter, we said, you know what, we don't have to do that. We think that we could pull off local at-home manufacturing, not literally in our garage, but we had a prototype shop that we worked with here in California. We still like them. We still use them for prototyping stuff, but we thought that, okay, we can pull off manufacturing 1,000 of these things locally. But of course, when the Kickstarter blew up, we said, no, that's not going to cut it anymore. And so we'd met Dragon Innovation. I think you had Scott on the show earlier.
Yes, we did.
Mm-hmm. He's great.
And we called them back up and said, hey, we're going to need you guys to help us out with overseas manufacturing.
Hey, we got this bucket of money now. So
right.
Help.
We can afford you now, and we need some help.
Yeah. That's what buckets of money are great for, actually.
Yeah.
Making things happen.
The product had been designed around mass manufacturing up front, and that's one of the things that can break your Kickstarter if you're not expecting it. And there's also, we managed to raise enough money that we avoided this sort of zone of pain that a lot of Kickstarter projects get into, where you can't build them in the garage anymore, but you're not really interesting for a contract manufacturer.
So you haven't got quite enough money to go elsewhere, and you end up being screwed. Yeah. You're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, so we got lucky there to be able to just bypass that.
Speaking of world of hurt, so I take it that means that you also worked in a ticket to China with your... you got a complimentary flight to China, is that correct?
As part of the process.
And a 6-month visa.
Yeah, or 10 or 12 tickets to China. Yeah. Way too many. It's fun the first 2 or 3 times, and then it just becomes a drag.
Yeah.
But trying to do it without going over there and just totally hands off, no, that's impossible. I wouldn't want to try and do a project that way.
Even for simple things, it's just not possible. It just blows up in your face every time.
So I remember people were all up in arms about that, like, oh, my watch is late. But I remember seeing it. I think we even talked about it on the show. We're like, that is a ton of watches, right? I mean, especially from starting from scratch. I mean, so what were some of the challenges you had when you were getting started up over there?
Well, first of all, how late were you?
Well,
in terms of the absolute first one you shipped out.
So the date that we promised on the Kickstarter was September, and the first unit out the door was mid-January. So in terms of lateness of
That's
Kickstarter
not too bad.
I mean, we missed Christmas, and we were really beating ourselves up over having missed Christmas. But there was really no way we could have shipped everyone's unit before Christmas, right?
Right. Plus, they bought them in March the year before or something like that. It's like, it's not like people thought it was going to be a Christmas present, did they?
I think some people did, and I feel for them. But in terms of lateness of Kickstarter projects, 3 or 4 months is not that bad. But was disappointing.
No, it's not that bad.
What was disappointing was how long it took us to sort of ramp up the manufacturing line and get to a full production capacity and be able to ship all 85,000 units that got bought on Kickstarter. That took a number of months after January.
So how long in total from the end of the campaign to the first shipment?
From the end of the campaign ended in June.
June, right.
And the first shipment was in January, so 6 months.
6 months. Okay, well, that's still not too bad.
I was going to say,
for those who don't know,
I'm a non-consumer, and that seems like, wow. It's like industrial. That'd be like, oh, okay, well, here's your bonus.
Well, see, that's the thing. With the modern consumer world, people are used to the buy it now button on eBay, right, or Amazon. Buy it now, it's in stock. This, waiting 6 months or 12 months, or some of them are 2 years behind, they take to finally ship. I mean, it's a different world.
Right. I mean, even some of the components that are in Pebble, you've got lead time of 3 or 4 months. And so, we placed orders, right, for components, for production quantities right after the Kickstarter ended. And, I mean, you're like, do we really want to lock in the design that soon? Well, we have to, because that's what the lead times are.
At least this little part right here.
I think there's even a photo in one of the Kickstarter updates of Eric signing a PO for $1 million for the screens or something.
Oh, wow, nice. We'll have to dig that out and link that in.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I'm about to do a Kickstarter this month for a project which I'm reintroducing, but I've had to buy, because some of my parts are hard to get and long lead time if I don't buy them now. So I've had to commit to I just paid $4,200 for a reel of bloody components, because if I don't get them, I'll be screwed and won't be able to fulfill the campaign. So I've got to make those decisions and spend money before I even start.
Yeah.
Because, I don't want to do a Kickstarter campaign and then promise, oh, sorry, I'll deliver in 4 or 5 months' time. I don't like that just from,
Yeah, certainly
if
if it's feasible to deliver sooner, then why not? Everyone, that's good for everyone.
Yeah, of course.
Less hanging over your head, and the buyers get it sooner.
That's the thing, and I don't want to deal with the complaints and the requests for updates. How did you have to deal with that? Or
not personally, but as a company we did, and it's
right. Yeah.
Sarah, who at the time was our sole customer support person.
Oh my god!
Personally answered. I think 50,000 emails over the course of like 3 months.
Let's take a moment of silence for. Was it Sarah? You said
yes.
That is admirable and terrifying.
It really is. And our support team, now that we're shipping and we have actual like technical support issues, that's one of the faster growing areas of the company.
Yep.
Man.
Oh, that is painful because everyone thinks, oh, look, I'll just, and the emails always start with, oh, look, I don't want to, waste your time, but, quick, can you just give me a quick update? And, and it's like, because people think, oh, nobody else will do it, I'll be the only one. Yeah. No.
And Dave, you'd probably know better than I, but is the Kickstarter kind of built-in private messaging system still really awful in terms of the user interface? I remember it being like 10 messages per page, and there was no way to navigate between the pages.
Man.
As a producer, I haven't used Kickstarter yet because it's only just arrived in Australia here. I've used the Australian version possible, which was, my campaign that I ran on there broke the possible system. It just, they just couldn't handle it. It didn't work. So they had to fix it all up, and it's not good. I've heard Kickstarter's not that great either for interaction.
The back end is pretty bare bones.
Well, all people care about is the money up front, right?
Well, how hard was it just to extract people's shipping information, for example? I mean, for me, when I ran my campaign for my rulers on Possible, that was the number one thing, and that's what broke in the system. I couldn't extract everyone's mailing addresses in a usable format.
Kickstarter didn't even have a mailing address feature. They had this one, you had one time you could send out a poll. That's what they called it, a poll, to all your backers and have them submit information. And we said, we aren't even going to do that. We just built actually a web application to manage all this because we would have had thousands of people requesting to change their address. And if you've got 1,000 backers, you can deal with manually changing people's addresses. But for us, that wasn't even feasible. So we built a web app to just let people put in all their information.
Well, that's kind of nice too, because then it kind of is built in your starting of your community then as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the people that are going to be developers and stuff like that. So
exactly.
Well, I do hope that's been fixed, because I'm about to use
Dave
Kickstarter
has no
and give
idea
it
how
a
to
try.
code.
Yeah, the last project I just backed the laser cut catapult thing.
I'll have to look that up.
Ended a couple weeks ago. So that's the most recent thing I've backed on Kickstarter, and they did add actual shipping address fields.
Right. Woo. Okay, I might think twice. Maybe I'll go back to Possible. At least it's they've ironed out all the issues with my last campaign, so
maybe
I should stick with that. Yeah, at least I know it works, right? Yeah. It's a known quantity.
But Kickstarter's a hype machine.
It's a hype machine, yes. That's it. Before... what do you think about the changes that they made? I think it wasn't a result of your campaign, but the result
of... Not directly. They would never say so, but...
Yeah, but there were a couple of projects that pushed them over the edge to where now you can't start a Kickstarter campaign unless you have a real prototype you can show.
Right. So the Locatron guys, which they're good friends of ours, just down the road... they were sort of the first Kickstarter campaign to get rejected under the new rules, although Kickstarter told them it was actually the old rules. That apparently you can't put home improvement devices on Kickstarter.
Oh, really? Why is that?
I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway,
too many scams, obviously.
I guess, some sort of super insulation or something.
Right. Free energy thing, or, yeah, right.
But anyway, they, rather than going on Indiegogo or something like that, they made this thing called Self-Starter where they just use their own website to get pre-authorizations on Amazon payments, which is the payment backend that Kickstarter uses.
Yep.
And they had success with that, although they had another source of funding, and so they were able to defer actually collecting the money until shipping, which probably helped bolster people's confidence to do something that wasn't one of the established crowdfunding sites.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's all a trust thing, right? If, some unknown person, pops up with their campaign, it's, well, how do I trust these guys?
Right.
But most people don't seem to care. I mean, I've seen campaigns that have gone...
Right, and Kickstarter is pretty hands-off, too, themselves. Theoretically, they're there to resolve issues, but they're pretty hands-off.
You thought 50,000 emails was bad, right?
Yeah.
Imagine how many Kickstarter get. Yeah.
Oh, that's messy. Speaking about funding, have you guys picked up any other funding since? I thought I remember seeing some
We did. Articles. We raised a $15 million venture capital round this spring.
Wow, that's impressive.
That means you guys aren't calling the shots anymore.
No, that's not necessarily the case.
No, that's not
totally the case, right?
Not necessarily the case.
Did you have to go on like those? I've only heard stories about that whole funding dance, the dog and pony show. Did you have to go along with that also?
I've heard some stories too, but I did not. I'm an engineer. I didn't have to do that.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I know this is backtracking a little bit. I wanted to ask you about China a little bit more because
sure.
You mentioned the part reels, like the 4 months rather of lead time and stuff like that. And I think that actually it kind of fell in that one. There was that one period where there was lead times went to like 28 weeks for a lot of parts. I remember it was really crazy.
Oh, it was 40 back in the day. Yeah. If you were doing stuff back in the early 90s. 40 weeks was a typical lead time.
This is not the 90s I'm talking about, David. It was recently.
No,
there was a lead time
when I was a boy.
Yeah, I mean, it varies based on class of components, too. We haven't really had any lead time scares. I mean, there's been a few close calls. And some of our lead times do get to be fairly high. 4 months plus. But...
Ooh, yeah.
That's
which
painful.
is 16, 18 weeks. But
yeah.
Never to the point where we've had really a supply chain issue shut down the line, that's really been
pretty good.
We've been lucky there.
That means your planning's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think it was Zach Smith, Hogan. I think he was talking about it, and maybe other people have as well, where we always talk about, like, you're designing prototypes over here, and you even mentioned that, you can get that sharp display off a Mauser, but then you go over to China, and there's just, like, all these no-label parts, or, you can get the parts, but they're not necessarily easy to get.
Genuine.
Yeah, well, not even genuine. Yeah, there is that, too. But even in the best-case scenario, that, it's just, like, the supply chain is set up differently than, a distributor in the stateside, like
sure.
an Arrow or an Avnet or something.
Yeah,
like
so
that.
we actually work with Avnet, and we buy from Avnet and take delivery in Hong Kong or something like that.
Okay. And then you just
for some of the components, and then some our manufacturer sources directly, and they've got their own supply chain, especially for like resistors and capacitors.
Yeah,
they've just got their approved vendors or whatever.
Yeah, I always wonder about where that balance point is, because there's always going to be like if you design in like some specific TI part, right? It's like you probably could get something similar, but then you got to play that datasheet game and do all the revalidation of components and stuff like that. And I just imagine that would be a really difficult thing if you aren't just living there. I mean,
right. I mean,
sounds like you were living there for a little while, but
close to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we specify especially for silicon, but other components as well, exactly what they are, what the manufacturer should be. And some of them we actually then just buy from Avnet or from the manufacturer and give them to our factory.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's kind of what I was wondering about, is that the ones you really care about, you take extra care to get them there.
Whereas an 0603 10K resistor, you just let the factory, source that from wherever
we say,
possible.
Okay, right. Yeah. Like, I want at least, tell me what your approved vendor list is. Give me the data sheets for all of them so I know roughly what's going into the product.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. If it meets your specs, it's probably good enough.
At a certain point, the stuff's just going to stop working if it's not right. So you always got that going.
Well, it's digital.
Right. And during pre-production, I mean, we say, okay, if you've got 3 resistor vendors, build a third of the units with each. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not perfect science, but
no, it's manufacturing.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the test side of things? I mean, I mentioned the catching it in test, but how extensive is your test setup, and did you have any involvement in that?
We did have involvement. So it's for such a tiny board. Pretty much we have to rely on functional test a lot and say, we're not testing every node. We just go, okay, if everything works, then it's good. So we do a test step after SMT and the code is burned on. Actually, I think it's at the same workstation where they flash the firmware. They do some testing and make sure all the voltage rails are good and make sure that the buttons and everything works. And then as part of the factory firmware image, there's some stuff to do a self-test of the memory and the accelerometer and all this other stuff that's self-testable.
And that's still at the bare board level?
That's still at the bare board level. And then there's some more tests sort of along the way as it's assembled into a complete watch. And to make sure that like Bluetooth performance. So, I mean, the antenna is not part of the bare board. So after the antenna is assembled, then they put it in an RF test chamber and measure the output power and make sure that's where it should be. And the waterproofing of the physical unit, they test for every unit to make sure it doesn't leak.
Oh, every unit is actually pressure tested.
Yeah.
Wow.
So initially, when we're ramping up the line, they actually pressure test it underwater. And then to increase throughput, once they're pretty confident in the process, they actually use a pressurized air test. So at least you aren't getting the units wet.
We had 10 failures, so we'll be by the hairdryer.
Are there any plans to, because once you build up confidence in your manufacturing, chain there, is there any chance of removing some of those tests and optimizing things? Because look, we've made 100,000 watches and we've had, only 0.0001% failure at this step. So you can sort of eliminate that step as there to save time and
right. I mean,
costs.
Well, there's some stuff that you do during pre-production that you wouldn't even do once production starts, like X-raying every board, right? You mean you wouldn't do that in production,
right? Yeah.
But even with Bluetooth, right? So we do an RF test at board level, and then we do an RF test on finished goods. And the Agilent test that runs that box, it's like a Bluetooth tester in a box or something. It's like $40,000. So there's a lot of capital cost associated with doing that test.
Right. Yep.
And so we said, okay, if the pass rate's looking pretty good, why not just drop the one at the bare board stage and just rely on the finished goods test?
Because that's, that's a very common thing to do, to optimize that, is to continually look at your production yields and figure out where you can optimize
definitely
stuff.
Yeah, everything goes to
very important.
The bottom line cost eventually, right? that cost hurts too, it feels like. I mean, I always know that, like, okay, I get it, it's good that, like, my boards work, but it's like, come on, they're doing so good. Just turn down the test a little bit, and that's when it bites you.
Yeah.
So this has been, I mean, you guys are making a lot of watches. I guess the question, actually, so one of the questions we had on Reddit, and actually a question I always have about this, because, Dave talks about his watches as well. How do you, do people still wear watches? I just use
I love my watch, dude.
I know, I'm just saying in general, like, I know fashion, I don't understand fashion, and, like, functionally, a lot of people are used to it from, just having watches.
I feel naked if I go out without my watch.
Yeah, I definitely had a phase, in my younger days when I was like that, and then I gave up wearing watches for a while, a year, really not too long before I started working on watches. And of course,
occupational hazard now.
Now I wear. Now it's an occupational hazard. I wear a watch every weekday. I don't always wear my Pebble on weekends, to be completely honest.
You get home, pour yourself a drink, take off the watch.
No, it's not like that.
Hanging on the wall.
Charge it.
Oh my God.
That's only once a week.
That's right, only once a week, Dave.
Right.
I went through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make it so you only had to charge it once a week.
Once a week, yeah.
You have like a little ritual every week. You're like, all right, this is it. This is my hard work manifest.
But in terms of people seem to want electronics in alternative form factors, and that includes wearable. And for us, it's about what are people going to adopt now and not some super futuristic thing that they're going to sort of think they want but not actually wear because it makes them look too nerdy. And
oh, my Google Glass is right next to me. I heard you say that.
For me, it's about having the right tool for the job. Right, the optimized tool for checking the time and doing a stopwatch and looking at the what day of the week is it? You know, what's the date? Nothing beats a watch, right? Having to whip out your phone is just stupid. Yep. Same with the calculator, right? My office is littered with physical calculators. I have them, you know, one calculator every square meter, right, of my office space, so that I can just reach for it. I don't have to use a stupid Windows thing. I don't have to get out my phone and call up the calculator app and that sort of crap. Right, they're non-optimized.
Your TI-83 emulator on your Android cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. You know, my Casio or HP emulator. You know, I don't want that garbage. Right? So it's just the right tool for the job because it's optimized. It's like a solar power. The battery never runs out for 20 years. Right, it's always there. I know it's instant on, ready to go. My watch is there. All I got to do is twist my wrist and bang. You know, there it is.
Yeah, we think it's the right form factor for the job, and it's a form factor that a lot of people are used to, and maybe not everyone is currently wearing a watch, but we think it's a form factor that a lot of people like.
Huh. All right, well, I guess...
Watches are popular. Who would have thought?
I know. Yeah, there's entire... Luddite. I get it.
Yeah.
So, do you have any, like... I know Woz is a big watch fanatic. Is he, like, one of your big fans? Or I know Chris Anderson, who's been on the show, I think he's a
huge fan. Yeah. Woz, I don't know. I think he's got one.
All right. That's
I don't
a good
know.
start.
I don't hang out with Woz, so I don't know.
Not yet. You don't hang out with him yet.
But he's too busy wearing his Valve Nixie tube.
That's right, yeah.
With the big 2-digit display, you know.
There you go. There's a power-saving device for you, Andrew, is put
Nixie tube display.
Yeah.
Nixie tubes, that's it.
You thought a boost converter to 5 volts is bad. Try 300 volts.
Yeah.
Enjoy that.
So do you have any idea how many watches you've sold all up? Because they're selling in department stores now, aren't they, or something?
Yeah, we are.
Like
which is awesome.
Ballpark?
Yeah, so we're online.
It's obviously in the hundreds of thousands.
We announced a number, and I don't know, maybe I'll look it up and we can go back to this at the end of the show. I don't want to announce a number that's different from the most recent one we already said.
Well, what's the most recent? I don't even know what that is. So maybe whatever the public number is probably the safest number for us to say here. So
yeah.
Well, we know it was 80,000 from the campaign.
At least 80.
Right?
Yeah, right.
So it's got to be double that at least. You know, if it's under 200,000,
275,000.
That
was a couple months ago.
Lot of watches.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So people do like watches then. It is definitive, folks.
Have there been any hardware changes in that time, or did you sort of nail it and sort of stuck with it?
Not really substantive ones, but we did switch away from using the CAN Bluetooth module to sort of putting the equivalent circuit directly on our own board, and that was a pretty big cost savings.
And then you had to get it certified yourself.
Right. So, we had to recertify it because because we designed our own antenna, we had to go through our own certification process already anyway.
Right. And that was worth it from just a cost point of view?
Or cost point of view. Yeah. And lead time.
So what do you think, Dave? Should we go to the Reddit questions eventually now?
Reddit questions. Questions.
I think some of these actually were covered.
I think a lot of them were.
So maybe what are some of your favorite applications you've seen on there? Because, I mean, that is one of the things that we mentioned here, and that is a big thing about it, is that people can, put their own applications on there. Have you seen any that are particularly, stand out to you that are kind of favorites?
I actually like, and this is a bit of a cop-out because we ship it with the unit, but I like the Runkeeper one. I use it for cycling because I don't run, but you start your cycling activity on your phone, and then it automatically on the Pebble actually brings up the interface and shows you your speed and elapsed time on the Pebble interface. And
that's nice.
And that uses the GPS because that's a normal app for your phone, isn't it?
Right, but I don't have one of those fancy bike mounts for my phone, so...
Right, so it's just a convenient wrist mount, yep.
Yeah.
Right, and you don't want $600. You don't want $600 jiggling around on your bike as you go over bumps.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. You can just leave it in your backpack and it tracks and it can track in there and transmits to your watch.
Huh.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And there's some cool stuff that people are doing with like home automation and remote controls.
Yeah.
Hooking it up to their lights or thermostat or whatever.
Smart house stuff and all that sort of jazz.
So it doesn't have any kind of like microphone input or anything like that though, right? Like, so there's no like Dick Tracy kind of functionality or anything like that. I guess
I mean, it's a common thing that you hand it to someone. It's a smartwatch, and can I talk into it? No, but we're not.
You can talk.
We think that adds too much.
No, just push the bloody button. We
think that adds too much complexity.
Yeah,
it does.
No, it
does. Try
and especially from battery, right? I mean, like that is like the central thesis here is needs to last for days. And and like I think about that too with like, it'd be nice if it does media type stuff as well, and like all that other stuff, but it's like then it will not last for days.
Right, there's the crowd that wants it to be an MP3 player, and then it won't last for days.
Exactly.
Well, that's like that.
This is crazy.
The Samsung one that was it Samsung, the one that like the Galaxy S4 was giving away with it.
Yeah.
And that thing was a spectacular flop as far as I've read about, at least. But that was a lot of that functionality that you were talking about with like the bright screen, the bright color screen, and I think it does.
It's got a camera. It's got voice. It's got. I think there's 3 microphones on that thing. They do all the same like spatial noise cancellation stuff that phones have.
Really?
It's literally a phone just crammed down into a watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feature creep. How you've obviously been following other watches on the market. How crap are these ones you buy on eBay and Deal Extreme and stuff like that? I mean, they're a dime a dozen. Everyone's churning out a smartwatch.
Hey, I've got one that's literally a dual SIM feature phone in the form factor of a watch.
Wait, what's dual SIM? What does that mean?
It means that you can put it on 2 cell networks at the same time.
Same time.
What? Why would you want that?
It's very convenient when you're trying to, you've got work and personal.
Right, or if you're traveling.
Ones.
Or in China, which is the domestic market, the calling rates vary a lot based on who you're calling and what network they're on. So a lot of people want to be on 2 different networks.
Do you have to like wear like a battery pack though? Or?
No, the battery life of this thing is like 4 hours.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's shit, right? It's unusable. And that's 4 hours when you buy it, if you're lucky. And then the battery in it's so crap and sourced from the absolute, cesspit of Shenzhen.
The one hungiest of one hung low, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. The worst alleyway in Shenzhen. And, this thing's just got toxic chemicals in it. It's not a real battery and it lasts a week, like before the battery actually dies completely and you can't recharge it.
So, Dave, I take it you've encountered a few of these watches. Do you have a favorite?
No, I just know that they're totally shit. All these products that are just, Me Too, built down to a price. And, when you can buy a watch like this for, $20 delivered or something, it's just bullshit. It's bullshit. It can't have a quality battery in it. It can't have, quality parts in it. It's just...
I don't know. Sometimes
possible.
You do. And what was that? The phone that Bunny found a few months ago that was like $8 or something.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's a one-off. You can't buy it anymore. It was
right. It was like they bought up some stock of cheap old components and they manufactured them into phones, but that stock is gone.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You can't buy it next month. It's just it's crazy. These things are built down to a price, and they're just usually garbage. That's my experience. It's not just watches I'm talking about. It's other products as well. Watches just another fad. That they've caught on to, and look, they can sell 1 million of them on eBay.
Right.
And
Andrew, are you guys seeing pricing power now that obviously you have the name, right? I mean, Pebble is a very strong brand, I think, right now, and obviously you guys have a lot of attention from the Kickstarter and then your venture stuff. I mean, does that change your dynamic with like a vendor, like a chip vendor then, especially?
I don't have to drive to the sales meetings anymore.
That's a good measure. Yeah. Do you get bought lunch?
They come visit us.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good measure.
And shout your lunch. Yeah. That's it.
Okay, yeah, that's good because you guys are into the. You said 275 right now.
Yeah,
that's a lot of watches, but that means that then projections are going to put you into millions and stuff like that as well.
Yes, it does change the relationship you have with the suppliers in terms of what you get access to, technology and.
Oh pricing. Yeah, you get early access then and stuff like that, and I bet you signed tons of NDAs.
More than I can count.
Yeah. Oh man.
And then how bold do you get in terms of look, we're gonna buy 1 million of this part because we can get a spectacular price point. How often would you commit to huge volumes above and beyond what you need for current production and projections and things like that? I know that's maybe
one of the things that's happened as we get bigger is that I'm not quite so involved in that side of things anymore. But I don't think we do that.
You have a purchasing department that sort of handles all that sort of stuff. And isn't that a huge burden off your shoulders?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You get to sleep now. That's fun.
Yes. Yeah. No more 1 a.m. Skype calls.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Those are fun.
I had a few of those, especially with our battery vendor.
Right.
We spun a custom battery, and there was a lot of back and forth there. Lots of 1 a.m. Skype calls.
Why?
Nasty.
Why does someone choose to do a custom battery, if you're allowed to say?
Dude, you optimize the power per volume.
We're trying to maximize the volume it occupies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Power. The power per volume is everything. Watt hours per volume is, if you can utilize every square millimeter of space inside that watch, that's a huge gain.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that so like in the battery game is custom like a? Because I know it took me a long time to find out about. I think Dave actually told me about like the cells and like how the standard cells are and stuff like that. But does that mean like in custom batteries that it's just a repackaging of standard cells then?
For lithium-ion polymer. The manufacturing process, they wind a foil. It's kind of like a foil capacitor type construction.
Cool. Okay.
Obviously the principle of operation is not like a foil capacitor, but the manufacturing technology is where they like laminate a bunch of films together and they wind it into a coil. And that winding can be done in any number of sizes, and so that's what you get to customize.
Cool. That's
and
really
you
cool.
can even get flexible ones these days.
Yeah, these days
they're really
there
amazing.
are.
Thin, flexible. Fantastic.
Yeah, there was another Kickstarter watch that's going really thin. I think their watch is like 0.8 millimeters thick or something. They built it into a stainless steel bracelet, and they're using one of these flexible batteries.
Do you guys get a lot of... My buddy has one of those like super thin like mechanical watches that are like... I don't know how much he spent on it, but it's like... do you guys get a lot of purists that are like, oh, well, if it's not... because watches are back into the the mechanical stuff as well. Do you get a lot of that kind of like purists of like, oh, I'm not touching digital or
or they probably wouldn't even talk to us. Well, we do get
a stainless steel band or
What we do get a lot of is people saying, well, my watch has a solar panel or it has one of those like spinning weight rewinding mechanisms. And wondering if something like that would work for Pebble instead of having to recharge it. And unfortunately, the power density you get out of those is not high enough.
Yeah, right. Wait, you mean that piezoelectrics won't work? Oh man, I saw a Pop Sci article about that.
I've done a video on that.
Well, my favorite one is transparent solar panels.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So that you can use it over the face, so you can get a larger surface area, so you don't.
But of course, if it's transparent, how much light energy is it collecting?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. It's a spray on PN junctions, right?
Yeah.
Wow. I got one of the world's most efficient solar cells, and looked at and measured its power output for powering a watch. When I was working on my calculator watch, and it's just nowhere near the requirement for charging the battery using the the charging the inefficiency in the charging circuits and everything else. You just can't do it. It's just
you waste money doing the MPP type stuff.
Yeah, and that's for a watch that was running on the smell of an oily rag, let alone one that only gets a week's.
Yeah, were you using a general like MCU, or did you find one of the hardware implementations of a scientific calculator?
Oh, no,
because I know those
just,
are out there.
Right. No, I was running off just a regular low power CPU.
Okay.
So, yep.
So you're saying that like someone designed it like in logic gates, or what do you mean?
Yes, there are like dedicated scientific calculator chips, and certainly 4-function calculator, but I believe scientific calculator. And I mean, it's not the kind of thing you can buy off DigiKey. I mean, they come from random Far East factories, and they typically are like wire bond, chip on board. They don't even come in packages.
Exactly.
But if you go buy a scientific calculator, that's what will be inside there.
Like the kind that's underneath that black goop. That's
exactly.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they're dedicated segment display ones, so it's not like you can interface it to a dot matrix sharp memory LCD or something like that.
Yeah, so a lot of times these calculators will be like literally that one chip and a solar panel or battery.
Oh yeah, that's it.
And a display and a keypad, and that's it.
Oh yeah,
and
that's all. That's it. And
$3 and it costs
they've been that way since 1970s.
Yeah,
they haven't changed. So
are those the kind of chips then too that have like? Because I remember, I think it was someone who had like an old RPN calculator too, and they were like telling me how accurate their calculator was. Maybe that was Dave telling me that as well.
What?
Where like old calculators actually didn't have accuracy, like even because of how the algorithms were in or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what I'm talking about here.
I don't know. I sound like more of a calculator nerd just then than I actually really am. So I don't know.
Okay.
No, fail, Chris.
Sorry. All right. Yeah.
I'm going to say, would you guys run another Kickstarter campaign? Because as you said, it's a hype machine, and you guys have the brand, and people would go, buy in frenzy, a Kickstarter frenzy, because it's Pebble, they've got a new Kickstarter. Is this something you consider, or?
I don't know. There's obviously pros and cons there, but I mean, now we've developed a lot more of the traditional channel. Like you said, we're in bricks and mortar retail, and we have our own online direct sales, and now we're in Amazon, so you could buy one on Amazon. And now that we have all that developed, is Kickstarter still the best? I don't know.
Right. It's like going back to the high school football game at that point, right?
No, because then it just becomes a marketing machine, right? That like a lot of people just use it for that. Technically, and
there
a
have
marketing
been some
and a
products
pre-sales.
that have gone back on Kickstarter.
Right.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Because that's essentially all I'm using it for, is like a pre-sales tool. Really, I mean, I can, if I wanted to, I could afford the money to, I don't need it to get the money to run a production run of my latest kit, for example. But it's a nice pre-sales tool so that you know exactly how many people are buying because they put their money up front. So,
yeah, I don't know if you're on the same level as them, though, Dave. Sorry.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But it's but you could have done it for a watch like this. If you do a small run of 100 or a couple of hundred watches or something, you could it only costs you a few tens of thousands maybe, or less.
You're talking about the scientific calculator?
Or just any watch in general kind of thing, or any kind of product like this. You could potentially do it yourself. You could actually fund it yourself, but it depends on, I guess, what sort of position you're in. So, but what I'm saying is that there's a bunch of people out there who use the crowdfunding sites as a pre-sales tool. They don't actually need the money. It's more of a hype and pre-sales thing than it is for genuinely needing the money to do it.
Yeah, we were not in that boat, but a lot of folks do.
Where are you? Are you guys in Silicon Valley? Is that right?
Yes.
So does that have? I mean, I'm guessing your clientele are pretty tech savvy. Does that? So that means you guys are probably pretty forward facing in terms of like the Silicon Valley community and stuff like that, right? I mean, like, do you see a lot of fans in the area?
Yep, fans and emulators, and certainly we were part of some of the very very small community of people 2 or 3 years ago that were kind of talking about doing hardware startups and how do you do consumer electronics as a startup these days. And of course, the amount of activity around that is really ballooned, and we participate. Yeah. We participate in a lot of the meetup groups and presentations and conferences and stuff around that. And
that's good. You're going to be at SolidCon?
SolidCon. What's that?
I've heard of SolidCon. I should try and go to that.
Yeah, it's
no current plans. It's next spring, isn't it?
What is
May
it
or
for
something?
the uninitiated like me?
It's an Internet of Things. It's like O'Reilly's Internet of Things.
Oh, right. Of course, right. Yeah. I know the one. Grown. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the Pebble is part of the internet. I mean, like, I'd say it's more than most, right? I mean, they are a control device for many connected other devices. They are.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first thing that some people think of when they say Internet of Things, but that is a category that we seem to get put in a lot, and I think it's fair.
Yeah, I think so. There's a question on Reddit. Somebody asked about. Can you tell us about the Pebble watch that was shown in the Kickstarter video? Like, was it like the one and only prototype, or was it hand built?
It was one. It was one of three.
Three.
They were 3D printed. They were 3D printed, including the lens. So yes, you can do 3D transparent printing. I think it's the SLA process, and like very painstakingly polished afterward. I think.
Right.
I think they cost us about $1,000 each. Just for the lens.
Just for the lens. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. ROI is pretty good, though, right? I mean,
yeah.
You guys made it back pretty quick.
And then we had the 3D printed prototype, and of course, the 3D printed plastics are not very strong. And we also did not have the form factor, the really tiny 2x1 centimeter circuit board designed. Right. And so we just crammed the display itself into the 3D printed watch. And then filled the rest of it with, I don't know, RTV or something to make it more solid. And
right.
and
hot melt glue.
Then we tethered it to the Pebble prototype board at that time, which was a couple inches square or whatever, just a general 2-layer circuit board.
Size,
Arduino size. And that was what was in the Kickstarter video, and so it was sort of really a watch. It wasn't some sort of CGI trickery in the video,
right?
But yeah, we had the circuit board outside, and I think that Wired actually during the campaign we let them put some photos up of that setup, so that's out there for viewers who can't quite envision this. There's photos up there on the internet,
so you can see the 3D printed case, warts and all.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Then that goes into the history case at the end, right?
Yeah. So I've still got that, of course.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So what lens are you using now? Is it like a quartz crystal kind of thing?
No, it's plastic, and we had to do that to get it curved to the extent that it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. Was there any thought of using like a proper crystal glass lens?
I mean, certainly they're a lot more scratch resistant, and so we do what we can. There's a coating on the lens now, but I mean, the design to get it to what it is, plastic was pretty much the only material that would work. And I mean, there's a lot of features on the inside of that too, and to get that sort of seamless top surface, you have to have the detailing and the mechanical features on the bottom, and so really that has to be a plastic part.
Did you did you say you had your hand in any of the plastics designs at all? I mean, I guess you.
No, I really don't. I mean, I had to keep up on that back when I was in China a lot and kind of supervising everything because only one of us was over there at a time. But
tag you're it.
Yeah, tag you're it.
See ya.
Tag you're it. I hope you're somewhat up on mechanical engineering.
I really need to get home and eat a burger.
But no, that's not really my area of expertise.
Well, it's good to keep up on that too, because if you're, when they come to you the next day and they're like, "Hey, guess what? You lost about 3 centimeters on your board."
Yeah. But it's fun. Like I learned way more about injection molding plastic parts than I ever thought I would want to know as part of this whole process.
Yeah. It's awesome, isn't it? I love it. I never want to design a tool, but it's so cool to me.
So what's your job these days as CTO? What does that entail?
A lot of sort of like setting the priorities for software development.
It's like purgatory.
Yep. And I mean, so there's that. That's sort of the purgatory side. The fun side is like I'm still pretty hands-on for electrical engineering. I mean, we have got me and one other electrical engineer.
That's good.
And so like this project of respinning the board to cost down by getting rid of the Bluetooth module. I mean, that doesn't sound exciting, but that kept us busy for quite a while.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And doing stuff like continuing to characterize the power consumption and like using current probes to understand exactly where power is going in the board. I mean, obviously, before going into production, we had a pretty good idea of what the design is like in terms of power consumption. But that's something where, if we invest even more time in characterizing it, we can do even better.
Yeah, you can start running firmware cross-testing and stuff as well, where you put it into this mode, see if it doesn't change.
And the firmware is a huge, huge contributor as far as what the actual power consumption is. I mean, I think if everything on the board is powered up, the battery life is like 4 hours or something.
Yeah. Yep.
So did you do like a internal development version of the hardware that sort of, broke everything out to test points and current probes, shunts built in, and things like that?
We've got that, and in fact, that's what our software developers still use because it's also got a JTAG, like JTAG to USB thing right on the board, so it's pretty convenient for them.
Right.
So we've been through like 3 revisions of that, but yes, we do. Basically, we spin our own development kit for internal use.
That's great.
Right.
Yep. Can you do JTAG over Bluetooth or no? Is that even a possibility? Like to do debug over Bluetooth? Or?
I think it's...
I'd imagine there's so much debugging of Bluetooth that it'd be difficult to...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that we want to debug are to do with the Bluetooth stack, and so I don't know how well that would... But maybe for app developers, right? Because their app is sort of running in a sandbox.
Yeah. Does it run 4.0? Does it do the low energy stuff?
Yes, it does low energy. Right now,
what's your opinion on that?
The only application for that right now is that we use it for is the getting the notifications from iOS 7. It's definitely opening up the market for Bluetooth stuff way more than it ever was with classic Bluetooth, both on the silicon side, like there's 4 main vendors of Bluetooth classic silicon, and there's dozens for LE. But also on the consumer product side, there's a lot of cool sensors and stuff out there for BTLE. And on the software development side, so I think I mentioned very early on that Bluetooth is really a mess software-wise, and that's mostly applies to classic Bluetooth. LE is quite such a complex beast. Yeah,
because it only sends back... That's the one thing I know about 4.
Well, it's like a publish-subscribe model in terms of the software abstraction.
Yeah, right. It just sends back everything or sends back some of the things.
Yeah.
And that's why the power also helps, right?
So my background is automotive and like CAN, and that's actually kind of a similar programmer's abstraction where it's like publish-subscribe. I've got this set of attributes, and I'm going to dynamically update them, and then you watch them.
Huh. That's an interesting parallel. I didn't know that they kind of map like that. That's... What, I guess we should have covered this at the beginning. What was the automotive background stuff you did?
Yeah, so I mean, my professional background was at first pure software, like web apps and that kind of enterprise software and that kind of thing. And then I went to school for computer engineering, and then I got into firmware. And I was working on automotive, like driver assistance, putting cameras in cars to detect surrounding conditions and then warn the driver, or like, turn off the high beams if there's a surrounding traffic or whatever. And then I decided that I had had enough of that and wanted to get into consumer electronics. And then that's how I ended up at Pebble.
That's crazy. Again, man, I really want to, have this timeline on this project's too long. I'd really like it to be 2 months instead of 2 years. But if that's your thing, that's good. That's more exciting. I'm sure it's very exciting out there. That is one thing I have to say. It seems like it's very fast paced and very, very customer, facing as well. So
yes.
you get interesting feedback. I'm sure.
Yeah, being able to talk to actual customers is, it's huge. And in terms of being able to make good products, and it's also really fun. And in other industries, that's something that doesn't happen quite as much. I know that. Obviously in different contexts, but I know that, for instance, in industrial, that obviously happens because you're making a product for one customer, but
right, yeah. Well, and with cars too. Like you have 6 million, maybe you have 6 million customers, but it's like you're not going to ask all of them. You're going to kind of just tell them what they get, and then they have choices amongst the marketplace. Whereas it seems
but the thing about automotive is that the timelines are so long, and so you're trying to like predict what people are going to want in 5 years. And I mean, that was never a problem in the past for automotive, but now that they're sort of getting into consumer electronics with infotainment and stuff, it's really tough. Like, who knows what people are going to be doing for consumer electronics in 5 years, and yet that's what the automakers are trying to predict.
Right. Driving their car with a watch, obviously. I mean, that's going to be...
Yeah.
Because we don't have enough distractions in the car, yeah.
It would just be... That's like very Bond-esque, you know, that's cool. Maybe that should be our final question. How soon until we see a pebble on Daniel Craig's arm in a future Bond movie? Is there any chance?
Oh,
is he going to say yes?
No, I can't say yes because there's nothing like that in the works.
Oh, come on.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
But you can control your car with your watch. Mercedes announced this a little while ago.
What?
They have a Pebble app to unlock your Mercedes from your watch.
And that's good that the battery life is long enough that, you know, if you leave your car in a car park for 7 days, you know.
Well, the battery just dies if you get there. But just as you're walking up to it, oh, shit.
Knew I should have taken the early flight. Well, Andrew, it's been really awesome. I mean, I really appreciate you being so forthcoming with. I mean, like, there's so many details to this stuff. It seems like it's been a crazy journey, but you know, very well. It turned out very well, and you know.
Thanks. I'm happy to share, and there's never enough out there about how sort of consumer electronics design actually happens, and I know as someone who wanted to get into the industry, it's like, what actually happens in the electrical engineering department at a consumer? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of panic and coffee.
Yeah,
and hotel rooms in China.
Yes.
In China, right? Yeah, lots of.
Yep. Any thoughts about now that you're a huge, well, you know, decent sized company? Any thoughts about potentially bringing it back home, which quite a few companies are doing?
Oh, manufacturing?
Manufacturing. They're onshoring now.
My Moto X was made in Dallas.
Yeah, my Moto X was too. It's tough because the supply chain support just really still isn't there.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just walk down the local markets and pick up a reel because your SMT line is stopped because you ran out of that part, you know.
Not that you want to be doing that anyway.
No, anyway, but still, you know.
But the option's
in a pinch. Exactly.
Yeah. Or a cup of sugar and a reel of 10Ks.
It's more like, okay, so we've got this charging connector on the side of the watch, and it's got these pins that are custom machined, and then we get them gold plated, and like finding the machining shop and then the gold plating service, and like we'd have to be flying all over the U.S. to find vendors that could do this stuff, whereas in China it's all within like half an hour drive of the factory.
Yeah,
the final assembly factory.
You know, they'll ship you this stuff in the U.S. You just got to send them buckets of money, like buckets of money.
We can only hope. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. It's been awesome.
I'm going to hope for the Bond movie first, I think. But
right, I know. Yeah. That's killer.
Yeah.
Maybe we can see him wearing a prototype Pebble watch. See, because that's where you want to show your prototype first. You know, you've got to get in.
James Bond movie.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
Good suggestion. I'll keep that in mind.
There we go. Yeah. Dave, you can be your marketing department.
If you can get it. Yep.
Yes. Andrew, thank you again for being on the show. It's been really, really great.
Sure, of course. My pleasure.
All right, so people can find Pebble at...
getpebble.com.
And they can find you on Twitter as well. They can follow you. Are you a Twitter nerd?
Not that much. I think the last time I tweeted anything was some months ago, but...
Ah, right. Okay. Well, don't follow Andrew on Twitter then.
I'm a pretty boring twerp or whatever you call a Twitter user.
Dave and I call that to each other, yeah.
It's nothing like a good mindless tweet of what you're having for lunch, you know.
Right, of course.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Later.